Hi, I'm Hannah,
And I'm Lydia.
and we are a pair of bookends.
And we were just hoping that we could interrupt this episode to ask you very kindly if you would sign up to our Patreon.
Yes, if you have some spare change rattling around in your pocket, we would so appreciate it if you could go over to patreon.com/a pair of bookends where you can support our work. We have been doing this podcast for nearly 2 years now, and we wanted the opportunity to get to know some of you a little better. And via our Patreon, as well as getting exclusive benefits, you can also have the opportunity to share your own recommendations with us and to chat with us. And it's just a nice place for us to have our own little hub.
For less than the price of a coffee, you can get exclusive Patreon only benefits, such as our Patreon exclusive book club, where you get to pick the book that we read each month, and also
Early access to all podcast episodes.
and your chance to ask our authors your own questions.
So please do, if you can, sign up to our Patreon via patreon.com/a pair of bookends and support our work. We would appreciate it more than you can imagine, and it helps us hugely to bring you all the extra special stuff.
So come and officially become a bookend.
Now on to today's episode. Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Lydia Clare. Welcome to another instalment in our debut Spotlight series, where we shine a light on the freshest authors and their work. Today, the spotlight is on As Young as This, a tender, devastating, and sharply funny novel. Margot has loved, liked, and lusted over various men in her life. Since she was 17, she pictured them like stepping stones, each one bringing her closer to someone to share her life with, and eventually fathered the children she always imagined she'd have. So how did she find herself here, single at 34 and about to make the biggest decision of her life?
Roxy Dunn is a writer, performer, and graduate of the BBC Comedy Writers' Room. In 2016, her play Intents and Purposes received a 5-star sellout run at Edinburgh Fringe before transferring to Soho Theatre. She's acted in multiple television sitcoms, including Channel 4's Babylon, directed by Danny Boyle. Her comedy pilot, Useless Millennials, was commissioned and broadcast on BBC Radio 4, and Roxy is also the author of 2 poetry pamphlets, Clowning, published by Eyewear, and Big Sexy Lunch, published by Verve Press. Her debut novel, As Young as This, is published by Penguin Fig Tree on the 4th of April, and we are so excited to have Roxy joining us today to chat all about it. Welcome to A Pair of Bookends.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
We got there in the end.
We did. We got there in the end, honestly.
It wasn't even the dog that interrupted.
So we always love to start our podcast by asking our favourite question, which is, what are you currently reading?
Okay, well, I'm currently reading the latest Sigrid Nunez, I think that's how you say it, The Vulnerables, which this is really, I had never even heard of her. And then I think it was it's December last year. So just literally three or so months ago, I was at the Hackney Down station, and just they have like book swaps and stuff, and I just picked up, it didn't even have the jacket on it, so I didn't even know what it was. I just picked it up. It was just like a hardback with, when you take off the sleeve so you just see nothing. And I read it, and it was, what are you going through? And I was just like, this is incredible. I can't believe I don't know who this is. And I've since gone and read 4 of her books. So then when I saw she had this one coming out that just came out sort of in January or something, I was immediately at the bookshop.
I've not read, I've seen her book in like her earlier books in charity shops so many times, and I picked it up and just not bought it. But now you've said that, I'm like, okay, like
yeah, it makes you wonder, or who else is out there that I don't know about, when stuff like that happens. It's wild. So yeah, no, I've so enjoyed delving into her over the last 3 months, I guess.
No, this is the second time that I've heard about her in like 24 hours. I finished a book yesterday, and she was in the author's acknowledgements. She was talking about like the authors that she's loved, and she was one of them. So now I have to buy her book.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It's like when something happens twice, you're like, okay, yeah, I can't ignore the signs.
Okay, I can't avoid it anymore. When next time I see it in a charity shop, it's coming home with me. So thanks for that rec. So before we get into the book itself, I want to talk about your experience as a debut author. And as I read in the intro, you've got a really impressive CV. You've dabbled in lots of different creative things, but I know from my own experience as an actor and as a writer that it's very typical of a creative. You're trying to sort of build a life in the arts, you have to kind of try lots of different things to kind of make it work. Was writing something that you've always loved, or was it a case of you weren't as an actor seeing the roles that you wanted, so you started writing your own? How did your writing journey kind of start out, and when did you decide that you want to write a novel specifically?
Yeah. So writing, yes, and it's always been something that I've done, but I wasn't one of those people that dreamt about writing a book when I was younger. No, that's a more recent like development that like kind of path I ended up taking. But I always wrote. I would write kind of angsty poems as child and teenager, and then the first time I properly sat down and wrote something was at drama school for my dissertation, because we could either write a play or a musical or something. Anyway, so I wrote a play, and then it did start to be a question of, I really wasn't working that much as an actor, and it wasn't, busying me enough. So then I started writing Edinburgh shows, like, you mentioned Intents and Purposes, which then I took up to Edinburgh with a comedy partner. So I was performing and writing probably in equal measure. And then it was when I was doing, like, I was developing stuff for television, but it wasn't getting made. It was just like, it was never getting past option stage, where they buy the idea, but then sort of like you never actually saw it, come to fruition. At least I didn't. Sorry, people do, but I wasn't. So at that point, I kind of took stock, and I was not. I guess I wasn't that satisfied with what I was doing, and I also realised in that moment I wasn't really watching much television, but I was reading a huge amount, and I thought, okay, maybe I need to actually lean into where my interest seems to be at this point. And I thought, I'm going to have a go at writing fiction. So this was probably back in 2019. So I sort of plotted out a novel, wrote it. It didn't sell. I mean, I say it didn't sell. I didn't actually even get an agent from it. I sent it off. I got some like full manuscript requests, so kind of enough to make me think, oh, maybe I should keep going. But no, the book wasn't saleable in its current state. And then and actually when that book nothing happened with it, I didn't ever imagine that I would write a second. I didn't know I would want it that much, but by that point I did. So then I wrote a second one, which is now this one that's coming out. And now, I've actually, a friend was asking me the other day how I feel about novel writing compared to the other strands I've had in my career, and I think it suits me the best, actually. I found it to be really enjoyable and pleasurable by and large. Yeah.
But was it difficult? Because obviously, like you said, so this is your second book, really.
Yeah.
But how did you kind of motivate yourself when the first book didn't get picked up? Like, how did you keep going to write a second novel?
I think about that because it felt so bad. I mean, I just felt so low. That is the honest truth. When it didn't get an agent, when I didn't get an agent from it, and I just thought, what am I doing? I've like turned my back on this other. It felt like I turned my back on acting and screenwriting, even though I was still keeping it going in the background. And I don't know. All I know is that I just didn't think I would write another one, and then the idea came, and I just thought, I'm just going to do it without thinking about it. And the truth, I don't even know, like, if this book hadn't have sold, I don't know whether I would have written a third. I sort of suspect I might have done, because I think actually at that point I just wanted it so much. So kind of, the more I did it, the more I grew in wanting it. It's like I cultivated this obsession. I didn't even particularly care about writing a book. It wasn't someone, like I said, who'd grown up wanting that since they were a child. But then the more I did it, the more I became fixated in the idea of having a published book out there. And also I'm one of those writers that's like sometimes annoying for people, in that I mainly love writing. I mean, there are days where I really, really struggle and don't like it, but by and large, I am happier when I'm doing it. Yeah.
I think as well, though, as your experience as a performer, and because me and Lydia are both actors as well, I think the rejections that you face as an actor can be quite like brutal, or just like not hearing back from something that you've prepped and put so much effort into, and you don't hear a single word. Like, it's something that people that work in kind of corporate jobs, they just have no kind of understanding of, because when they prep for an interview and they put all that time and effort in, they at least get like an email back to say no, whereas like sometimes we just don't hear anything. So I think like that, those rejections that we receive probably have definitely prepared you for the rejections that you might have faced as a writer.
You're absolutely right about that. I sort of I underestimate that, because rejection's just been so much a part of my creative life that I also forget about the fact that I'm very well versed in it at this point. So it probably doesn't cut as deep, but it did. When that first book didn't get it didn't go where I wanted it to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a real moment of kind of, what am I going to do? But yeah, and, you know, kept going. And I do, yeah, going back to what you said about acting, I do like I like the tangibility of writing as well. So even if you don't get what you want from the result of it, it still exists. Whereas I think the self-tapes and the castings, they're kind of out there, but you can't really hold on to them, you know?
Yeah, it feels like with writing, and it's the reason that I started trying to dabble in writing a lot more, is that you feel like you've got some kind of ownership with it that
Yeah.
you don't have with acting. It's like, well, I can choose when I write, but they choose for me when I act and when I get to perform. Obviously, I can
Right.
put my own stuff on, but like, you know, I might not get paid for it. So
Yeah.
like, you know, you can make that choice of no, I'm going to sit down and write today. I don't need somebody to give me that opportunity. I can take it for myself. And so I think there's something really nice in that.
Yeah, and always just getting, I mean, I suppose you could argue this for acting as well. Well, you're getting better with every tape you do, but I certainly didn't feel I was. Whereas with writing, I really did think, well, if I keep going, I just keep doing it, I must be getting better, you know? I really felt like I was working a craft.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So what was the process with getting As Young as This out into the world? Like how did this happen?
Yeah, so this all came about, like, I'd say relatively quickly, but then there's been this very long wait between getting the book deal and actually being published. So I got the idea in, I think it was the end of 2020, and then I actually submitted it off to agents within a year. It was like 1 year later I was sending it off. So I'd like redrafted it quite a bit in that time, had some first readers give back comments on the manuscript, and then signed with an agent in April 2021, I suppose. And then she took it out on submission in June of that year, so like 2 months later. So I did another maybe 1 or 2 drafts with her, and then it went out on submission, and then my editor bought it in June. But it's been almost 2 years until publication, if that makes sense. So it'll be
Right.
April 2024 that it comes out, so 22 months. So this bit's been longer than the actual process of writing it and selling it, actually.
Well,
Yeah.
thank God it's out in the world, because we both absolutely loved it. Genuinely, we both loved it, and we were telling for our listeners, we were telling Roxy before we started recording how much this book emotionally devastated us both. We were not okay, but we are going to try our very best not to spoil anything for you, because you need to go into this blind like we did, and it's a painful experience, but one
Really is.
I'm strangely grateful for.
Well, sadistically thrilled to hear that.
So onto the book itself. Obviously, as you can tell, we did enjoy it. It's a brilliant exploration of many themes that will always like resonate with people. One of the things that I love that you wrote was, in some ways you find it easier than happiness, which comes laced with the anxiety of losing it, which I think is a fantastic line. And I felt that so much of Margot, our protagonist's difficulties, were based on the concept of never quite feeling happy enough to relax into her relationships. So what I really wanted to know was, what was it like to develop her character?
Yeah, she sort of came out of this observation, and also, well, just this. So maybe I have to go back a bit to talk about this, but I felt like, so when I spoke to I came out of a relationship in my early 30s with somebody who I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and it was quite a shock to be in that situation. I think because actually I had been so sort of like, finding a partner and having a family was so on my radar that it wasn't like I suddenly woke up and went, oh God, whoops, I kind of want to have a child, and now I'm like in my 30s and I'm single. Like, what have I been doing? Like, it felt very surprising to me, because I'd felt like I was sort of, to use the term, on track up until that point. And when I then spoke to other single friends and women I met, so many people felt the same way, that they had, quite strategically been dating and then still found themselves in a situation of being without a partner and wanting to start a family. That I guess at this point, I sort of felt like there was room for a protagonist who was quite like clear and strategic about what she wanted and the way she operated in her relationships. And I felt like I wanted to give airtime to that, because I'd read so many sort of like, I suppose, like kind of that like drunk hot mess characters, but I hadn't really, come across somebody who was so strategic. But then I suppose this links back to your point, which is she's almost like, she's strategic to her own detriment, right? Like she's so sort of, almost like cerebral about the whole thing, and has got her flaw is about needing to actually relinquish control, right? Whereas I suppose for a lot of people, it's about needing to take more control over their wants and how to go about getting those. But I think for her, it's about needing to let go of that a bit. And I'm not actually sure if I've answered the question now, but what was it like writing that character? Yeah, I suppose that's more where she came from, channeling the voice that was like, but why? I've done everything I was meant to do and I'm still in this situation almost, you know?
Absolutely. And she's so charismatic as a character. And I feel like despite some of the flaws that she might have, I feel like you become so connected to her and you really become invested in her kind of want for certain things. And so you are behind her the whole way. And it's just so brilliantly done.
I think as well, you were exploring the relationships that she has throughout her life, but you're also exploring like her relationship with herself and how that kind of evolves over the years, and how, yes, these relationships changes the way she perceives herself and the way she perceives her life and the trajectory of it. But there's also, she's examining like what her wants are and what her desires are. And I mean, we've already kind of mentioned on the acting front things to do with you, but a lot of her experiences as a jobbing actor really resonated with me. There was the ambition that she has and how that sort of fluctuates throughout the book. She kind of doesn't know what she's doing with her career, whether she's doing the right thing for herself, the sort of like rejections that she faces, the motivations that she has, these shitty side jobs that we have to do to kind of make a creative career work, the lack of security which she kind of really faces when she's in later relationships. She's like, they've got a lot of security, they provide her with some kind of security, and it's sort of like, what are the kind of morality or ethics around that? I don't know, like that. It calls into question those sorts of things, which I found really interesting. But what was it in terms of her as a jobbing actor? What was it about that experience that you wanted to capture?
Well, I suppose that's just another area of her life which she needs to grow in, that she feels frustrated in, and that adds to her sense of, I mean, she just she wants the whole book, doesn't she? She never sort of stops wanting. She just continually is looking forwards. She's very rarely just content with where she's at. And I suppose that's just, it's not a career, as we've discussed, it really lends itself to satisfaction very often. And I suppose it worked from that point of view. And then, it's as she gets older and as she grows towards the end of the book, which is accepting that actually she will be prepared to let that one go in order to make this other decision that she wants to make, and that other things then take priority. And I suppose that's part of her kind of growing up and coming of age in a way.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting what you said, that she's always like wanting with like everything that she does. But, and not to get like too bleak, but I know it's like a massive issue with the fact that we live in a capitalist society, so like we are always left wanting, and that's the way like society sort of like not breeds us, but we are but like we are encouraged to kind of want all the time, and like nothing is ever kind of enough. But I think especially that's the case for creatives, is that nothing ever feels like, you never kind of quite feel enough. Like you need more validation, and you feel like you're always constantly trying to prove yourself, and there's always somebody in that industry that's done better than you, and always something else that you need to strive for. So I just really loved the way that you explored that. And I also loved seeing her experiences, like taking a show to Edinburgh Fringe. I imagine that some of that is from your own experiences. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more simple answer to that question, I suppose, is also you tend to put stuff that a lot of what you know and your experience, your friends' experiences in your early work, right? And making her an actor, there was so much to draw on from my own experience as well in that strand as well. So yeah,
absolutely. There's so much that you could say about being an actor and the creative career that we're trying to forge. Like it's, I feel like, yeah, you could write several books about that life.
Well, yeah, not. I don't think I'll be writing any more actor characters, but yeah, I think people do find them interesting to read about as well, don't they? People who are and aren't in the profession, I think find there's something quite appealing about that world to people from the outside, and then for people on the inside, I suppose it's just like you said, it's relatable, isn't it?
Yeah,
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really loved about the book as well was Margot's relationship with her family. And she has such wonderful dialogue with them. That there are conversations that they have, which is just fantastic. And particularly with her dad, who at one point completely just shows his complete disinterest in his children as people because, you've not done anything really that I'm interested in yet. But I love you, which I thought was just brilliant. Why did you choose to have this type of family around Margot?
Oh, well, I think, I think it was really important that she had, did I just want to write? I think I'm drawn to writing worlds that I want to be in, right? So like you're going to spend a lot of time with the book and I, as the writer, and I wanted that warmth and I wanted to, and I write, you're writing to entertain yourself. So the scenes with the father, it's like, I'm just trying to write something that would amuse me or kind of provoke me, or it kind of comes from that. And I think having that unit around her. But then you're thinking about ways that characters can play off each other. So if Margot's, relatively self-indulgent and emotional, then you really want the sister character to be a foil for that. So to be much more, much more rational and kind of and calling her out on stuff. But then I think so many books do this, and often people love the peripheral characters, and then people say, oh, the sister character, I love the sister character. And sometimes people say, oh, I wish I could have just had a book of that. And you're like, yeah, but you can't. Like they can only really ever, you can't, they're not really protagonist worthy, only because everything you love about them would be unfulfilling for the course of a whole book, if that makes sense. But they work really nicely, to play off against a main character who, let's face it, needs calling out on her self-indulgence at several points.
I also loved that the dialogue that you wrote between them. Like, it was so witty and funny, and also at points just like deeply resonant. How was it like for you to write dialogue? Because obviously you were a playwright as well, so you're used to doing dialogue, I would assume. But how does it feel doing it in this form?
Yes, so the dialogue is, like, for me, by far the easiest bit of writing, and it's the bit that I would just have a whole book of, really. My age my agent says she's very patient with me, because she writes things like, this was in like earlier drafts, and I've just given her the another draft of something I've just written, and she says things like, fantastic dialogue, lovely ideas. Could we just even have a suggestion of where they might be at this point in time? Like, are they in space? Are they like, I just don't write any description. I'm so bad with that, actually. I mean, I really need to be told to, oh yeah, okay, yeah, they look like this, their hair is this color. I have such little interest in it, but I know that you do need it. So yeah, I kind of have to be told to drip feed that in.
That makes me feel so much better, because I always start with dialogue. And find it really difficult to move into anything else. I think it, like, for me, definitely, it's always wanting to write dialogue that I'd want to read out as an actor. That's what kind of excites me about it. But yeah, certainly I can imagine that kind of writing everything else that needs to go around it for the reader is the difficult part, because dialogue's just so exciting.
But you have the other writers that they're the other way around. They find description much easier in dialogue to be hard. So
I can imagine. I have a quote though, so I'm going to read your book back to you. I'm sorry about that.
It's the first time anyone's done this.
And this isn't dialogue, so clearly.
Oh, great! Oh, yeah, okay.
So you wrote, it's really early in the book. You write, from Margot's voice, this striving for equal affection will be a recurring feature of your romantic relationships, but of course at 17 you cannot know this yet. So, we're reflecting back on her experiences, and so much of the book, we see her grappling with the imbalance, I guess, in her romantic relationships. And I felt this so much in like, I'm in a very good relationship right now. I just want to flag that, like, this isn't me having a therapy session. Like, I am absolutely happy in my relationship now, but I have very much had relationships in the past where there's definitely been an imbalance, and so much of what you wrote about that really resonated with me, and definitely things that I've seen my friends go through and things like that. Why do you think, as this is a big question, I'm aware, but why do you think as women we sort of value romantic, I don't know, reciprocation, maybe, is that the right word, over valuing ourselves?
Gosh. Well, But we're right. I think in a way we're right to value romantic reciprocation, right? The problem is with balance. And I think that lots of people spend quite a long time, and it's not actually just uniquely when they're younger. I mean, it can go on all the way through life, right? In terms of accepting relationships that aren't reciprocal, because it feels, I suppose, for a number of reasons. I mean, potentially scared about not meeting somebody else who might be able to give them the other things. But yeah, I mean, because I suppose in Margot's sense, it's that she's quite strategic about wanting, somebody who's going to fulfill her in that. She's at the bit about the intellectual, physical, and mental stimulation or something. I can't quite remember now, but where she's looking for somebody who will, give her these specific, like has these specific traits and attributes. But I suppose really that actually Margot's thing is about accepting when she's got to, let go.
I think you're right when you said, like actually, and you've just made me rethink, what I was asking there. Like, it actually is okay to want romantic reciprocation. But I think the problem is like how much of our time is spent, like, and how much I've seen, for myself and for my friends, how much I see women who are wonderful and intelligent and incredibly accomplished people. Why do I see them sort of constantly trying to fight for the affections of somebody that is just not willing to give them what they deserve?
Right. Yeah.
And it's really frustrating to watch happen.
I think in a nutshell, then actually the answer is just no more simple than people are terrified about being alone, right? I mean, it's just what it comes down to. That is the very deep-rooted fear that I think most people experience. Not everybody, but that's like seems to be at the center of like the human condition, right? So I think it's trying to avoid that.
Yeah, completely. I was really curious about the way that you've structured the book, because obviously each chapter is dedicated to a different relationship in her life. How did you kind of decide how much time to spend with each person? Like, is this something that you kind of plotted out beforehand? Is this something you kind of learned as you wrote? Like, how did it work?
Yeah, I didn't plot out this book beforehand. It was all very kind of came to me quite instinctively. And the men, it just seemed certain characters just seemed to merit more time than others because of their weight in the story and their role in it. Whereas others, which we only meet, maybe she only meets them 3 times, like Malik, for instance, just seemed to be more like, she even says what he represents. So it felt right that he would have a smaller segment. The structure of the book always had I always knew I was going to do it with the men, but as different chapters. But the bit that has changed quite considerably from an early draft was that the beginning and ending, the bookends were entirely different. So when I first wrote the initial draft of this book, it was really weird. It was like I imagined this. I had this image of this woman, like dressed in white, this kind of Jesus figure, gathering all of her exes at a table, like the scene from the Last Supper, and she basically brought them all there. And each of when she understood, she knew why she got them there, but we as the reader didn't know, and they didn't know. So all found themselves in a room together. Then I did each chapter as each of the men. And then the big kind of ending was that she stood up and revealed that she was pregnant by Immaculate Conception. And anyway, so I sent this early draft to a friend, and she was like, yeah, I think you've got 2/3 of a really good book here, but lose the magical realism, because like that's not working for you. And so then I had this period of about, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 days where I was sort of just like pacing around town, desperately trying to work out an ending. And then it was a different friend who'd also read this early draft who said, well, what is it you're actually trying to say? And I said, okay, well, I think it's just basically to do with, empowerment and the fact that, you can as a woman choose to do it alone without a partner. And then she said, okay, well, what's the simplest version of that? And I was like, well, I guess just becoming like a single parent by choice. And then I was like, oh. And then that's when I went back and decided that would be the beginning and ending, essentially, her decision about whether or not to do that.
I mean, I would like to read the early draft. And I definitely
on
think
my hard drive.
that is like my ideal role as an actor is getting a role in that play of this Jesus like woman bringing her exes to the table. I would have so much fun in that role, let me tell you.
One aspect of the book that I loved, amongst many, was the idea of kind of chance and how different life can be with your small decisions and the much bigger decisions that you make in your life. And I was fascinated by this kind of like sliding doors kind of concept of like, what if? Was this something that you wanted to translate for the reader?
When you say translate, do you mean kind of?
Yeah, so was it something that you wanted us to pick up on, this kind of idea of what if and the chances that we make in our lives?
Ah, I see. Actually, I almost wonder if I was going in the opposite direction. I think it might be that Margot barely almost believes in chance. I think she feels this kind of comes back to that point I was saying about her being so in control and having to let go of that. Because I think at the start, she just believes that almost her entire life is there for her to mold, and that actually she's so in control of it that external factors don't really come that much into play. And I think part of it is her journey is having to accept that this bit has been beyond her control. In spite of everything she's done to try and find a partner, her life hasn't gone the way that she wanted it to. And it's her kind of coming to terms with that and making peace with that and letting go of this preconceived narrative that she's been holding onto so tightly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that her sister says to her towards, when she's making the decision about whether she wants to kind of go it alone. And her sister said that her main concern is that, I think it's her sister, says like her main concern with her doing that is that she's just trying to control the outcome of her life rather than just letting things happen. She says like it is possible for you to find somebody for you to be with and to have children with. But what you're doing right now feels like it's sort of trying to just keep as much control as you can of a situation.
Yeah. That's the Shani, I think, isn't it? In the latest.
Oh, it is. Sorry, it is. Yeah,
no,
not a sister.
No, completely. All these female characters, yay!
They're all so good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Trying to, exactly like you said, just trying to hold on to that belief that she can control everything that happens to her.
Yeah. I think, there's an element of that in all of us, like wanting to, there's so much, and I know I keep banging on about the fact that it's like the life of a creative, and it probably sounds really wanky, but it feels like we don't have, I've lost the word that I want, it's to do with like ownership.
Autonomy or something.
Autonomy, yes, that's exactly it. You're the writer, of course, but it feels like so much autonomy is kind of taken away from us as creatives, and I think so much autonomy is taken away from us as women as well. And I've lost my train of thought. As soon as I forgot the word, it's gone.
Yeah,
it's gone.
I mean, to echo or just to say a different point, it's there is an interesting line there, isn't there, about how much you can control and how much you can't, because simply I wouldn't hold the belief that we should just stand still and let life happen to us. So it's like it's just an interesting blend, but Margot needs to she's too much in the I'm driving it camp, I think.
Yeah. And one thing that I was really pleased about that you explored, and I think it's kind of close to what we're speaking about now, is there's a term that, and I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's a term that Nell Frizzell she wrote a whole book about, and it's the panic years. And I feel like this is the place that, have you heard of this before?
I've heard of the book, but I haven't read it.
Oh, well, it feels, I've got it and I've started reading it, but I've not read the whole thing. But I also listened to a podcast that she did, which I think she put out alongside the book. And it is about like that period in your life, that kind of late 20s to early 30s period where like you start worrying about like your achievements and looking at your life. And I think it's especially around, whether you should have children or not, because it feels like the clock starts ticking when you hit a certain point in your life. And I've started feeling that myself. I turned 29 in January, and a lot of my friends have started having children, and it feels like, if I want to have children, do I need to start doing it now? Like, it feels like the pressure's on. And like I've had conversations with my boyfriend, and he's kind of like, yeah, but you've got so much that you want to achieve with your career and and it almost feels like, well, that's okay for you to say. It feels like you sort of resent the man without wanting to. You're like, well, it's easy for you because you've got a lot more choice than I do. You've got a lot more time to play with. So it does feel like the pressure's on. And I think fertility is something that's kind of not spoken about in the open enough. And it's actually a really scary topic for a lot of women. Why was it important to you to sort of write about these things? And I wonder, did you have a research process around looking at what options are available to women in Margot's position?
Yeah. So I think in answer to why I was writing about this, I mean, because like you said, there comes a point where once you hit late 20s, I'm probably up until about, the age of 39, 40, 41, whatever, I don't, I think it's impossible to not think about children in the sense of, do you want them? Do you not want them? Do you want them, but you're not with a partner? Do you not want them, but your partner wants them? I mean, it's in every conversation, right? It's the forefront of, it's been the forefront of my mind. So I think for that reason, it was very, it felt like something that I was naturally gonna want to write about.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, once I came up with that idea about, okay, yeah, right, so it doesn't need to be an immaculate conception. It can be a woman deciding to have a child by herself. At that point, I began, researching single motherhood quite intensively. And the bit that really stuck with me, and that I think just potentially I just found most interesting actually, was this bit that somebody had said, it's, for me, the hardest part was actually having to let go of the narrative of doing it with somebody. And then that was when I was thinking about, that'd be really cool if I could find a way to show that, through a literary device, about letting go of a narrative. And I don't want to give spoilers at this point, in terms of the ending, but that's sort of where that came from. How could I show that process of, grieving, letting go of something, and then ultimately it being empowering and be able to move forwards from it. And then again, that made sense with the narrative in terms of, well, she starts the book and then she's going back through her story, like how did she get to this point?
I absolutely loved that you explored this, and it really got me thinking, so and maybe slightly panicking.
Oh no.
But I think it is, I'm glad that you've written about this, because I don't think it's spoken about often enough. And I know that, like, I listened to Elizabeth Day's podcast, and she talks a lot about like fertility and her own struggles with it. And I think, it's just really important that these things are spoken about and it is in public conversation, because, it's something that all women have to kind of go through in their lifetime. And women make up how much of the population, but these conversations aren't happening enough. So yeah, I was really, really glad that you spoke about it and wrote about it. So thank you.
Oh well, no, I'm pleased, and I hope I haven't panicked.
No.
Lean into the empowering angle.
No, absolutely. It did feel empowering. And yeah, I think we need to be careful about spoilers, as we've said. But there is a definite sense of empowerment in the book. And that's all I'm going to say.
Just prepare yourself, readers. Prepare yourself.
Yes.
So before we let you go, I always have to ask people, because I'm obsessed. I can see your wonderful bookshelf behind you with some many great books on there. But could you tell us, what are your literary influences?
Well, okay, so I suppose influences the same as my favorite writers, the people I read. Yeah, I'm sure they will have, seeped into my writing. So anything Elizabeth Strout or Sally Rooney writes, I will read gladly. So yeah, there'll definitely be two of my main ones. Sigrid Nunez is a new top favorite, I have to say, having now read 4 of her books in 3 months. And yeah, anybody else that's had quite a strong, I'm trying to think. I think those are the main ones that kind of spring to mind. Yeah, I've read quite a lot of older people as well, people who have I have been the last sort of year, people who have died. So yeah, I don't know, I I've been finding that interesting, like reading they're like relationship books but set in another era, and kind of seeing how that's, I suppose, in a way that feels like fresher to me, because it's maybe a writing style that I'm not encountering in my day-to-day life as much with more modern fiction. So kind of just reading those books. I'm trying to think now, like Margaret Drabble and people who actually, sorry, I think is still alive, so that was a weird example of saying they're all dead. But yes.
I love those, and specifically, we are big Sally Rooney fans here, and we're so excited that she's got a new book coming out this year. So yeah, the news of that, I rang Lydia hysterically and was like, she's got a book, and she was like, I know, I've just seen it. I was like, why didn't you ring me then?
I was on a bus. I was trying to contain my excitement, because, as our bookends will know, when I get excited, I get a bit loud, and I would have got some strange looks. So I'm trying to be calm. Hannah rings me screaming down the phone. There's a new Sally Rooney. I was like, I know, I'm trying to be calm.
Public place.
So true.
Public, I'm done.
I haven't actually read any Elizabeth Strout either, so
Add that to your list. My favorite ones are the Lucy Barton series. So like the
yes, I've got the first
William.
one, but I've not read it yet, so terrible.
The first one's Lucy by the Sea, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's like the same set that is in the same character. Yeah,
The first one's Lucy by the Sea. I thought it was My Name is Lucy Barton.
The first is My Name is Lucy Barton, and then the Lucy by the Sea, I think, is the most recent in that set.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Lydia, you just sent off a mild panic. I was like, I thought I'd got the first one in this series, and now
Calm yourself.
You have.
So I wanted to ask in regards to As Young as This. So you've spoken before about you writing things for TV. Is there anything on the radar for an adaptation with As Young as This, or would you not be allowed to say?
Yeah, I can, because not that currently there isn't. So if any producers are listening and
get on it, please.
Then get on it.
I'd very much like to see that.
Yeah, so would I. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would lend itself very well to an episodic structure as well. So
it is written that way, coincidentally.
Exactly. Well, look at that. Look at that. We've done the work for you, producer. We, who am I? I'm not, you have done the work for them. I just involved myself in the process. That's good.
Listen, it's already casted. Me and Hannah are there.
So please. You don't need to
worry about that.
Right between yourselves, Margot and Romilly,
Yeah, that'd be grand. I'd love that very much. Yeah, thanks so much. So to end on, we love to finish by asking if you've got any recommendations for our listeners. So it can be anything that you've watched recently, any films, TV, podcasts, books. It can be anything at all. So
yeah, okay, great. Yes, I absolutely do, because I went to see American Fiction last week at the cinema, and I just loved it. I thought it did everything a film could possibly do. I was moved, I was like thought-provoked, I was laughing out loud. I just thought it was brilliant, and I'd be intrigued to read the book now. Not that I often do it that way around. I mean, normally I'd read the book and then watch the film, but yeah, I'd love to know how much, because it's quite meta and I want to understand how much of it was in the book originally. So yeah, definitely recommend that. And anything else? Just finished One Day on Netflix, as most of the population have. Yeah, the thing I find about that just so funny is it's really nostalgic, and I was thinking that even from the first episode, and I was like, I wasn't even born. It's like, I think it's 1988, the first episode, and I was like, yeah, like right back there, and I'm thinking,
good old days.
Yeah, I think like most of the population, it made us emotionally unstable. It's so sad, but I don't know. I didn't feel, and this is quite controversial to say, I didn't feel as much of a gut punch with the series as I did with the book. The book felt like more of a shock to me than the series did. I don't know if it's because I knew it was coming, but it did. I don't know. I don't know if it was that. So I don't know if it kind of ruined the twist for me. Because but then it was really moving, but my favorite episodes were like 11 and 12. I think the final ones are 13 and 14, but I loved like the 11 and 12, like the sort of the build up to it.
That in the Paris?
Yeah when she comes in holding her throat and she says like, so good. And I'm very excited to watch American Fiction, because I was deciding the other night between watching that and Poor Things, and I went with Poor Things.
Also excellent though. So yeah,
very good. But yeah, American Fiction is next on my list, so I'm excited. But yeah, thank you so much, Roxy, for all your recommendations and for joining us today. We both absolutely loved your book, and we need our we need our listeners to read this book so that we can chat to more people about it, because we've tried our very best not to give any spoilers with this one, but just prepare yourselves, listeners. Just prepare yourselves. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you so much for having me on this and for asking such insightful questions, and some of which I felt I wasn't really prepared for, and I need to go away and think about my answers too.
The second you come off this call, I know that you're gonna, especially with the literary influences, you're probably gonna think of like a list of writers that you've not mentioned. It's always the
live writers. Yeah.
Yes, live writers. Yeah. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
Yes, Instagram and Twitter.
Excellent.
And I believe I have a TikTok account. Yeah.
You do have a TikTok account.
I do, and I have a TikTok account. Yeah.
Excellent.
I think it's all just like Roxy.Dunn.
Fabulous. Well,
So,
we'll find those and link them in the show notes as well. But the link, the most important part, is the link to buy As Young as This, which will be published by Penguin Fig Tree on the 4th of April. And the link to buy that will be in the show notes also. So go grab yourselves a copy immediately. That's all we've got to say for now.
And then message us about what you think about the
Oh,
ending.
please do. I don't know if I can even keep that in, Lydia. That was dangerous territory.
We did well.
Roxy, thank you so much once again. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you. So enjoyed it. Thank you.
For our listeners, go give Roxy a follow, go buy her book, and if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. You can also find extra content on Patreon, and if you enjoyed this episode, please do rate, review and subscribe, because it is our goal for this year to get in the UK podcast charts, which are impossible to get into. So yes, please go do that. And thanks so much for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.